Welcome to the Samuele Tini Show, where business, innovation and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in. Welcome to a new episode. Today, we are going again in the future markets, and we are going to do with somebody that has been at the forefront of investment, creating companies, supporting entrepreneurs. So I'm very happy to have here today the CEO and founder of Kuzana. We will learn what is Kuzana is, Kyle Schutter. Kyle, it is a pleasure to have you here today.
Samuele, great to be here. Excited to be on the podcast.
And Kyle, you have done companies, you have founded company in East Africa, but before that, and before going to understand the mistakes and the work and what is the boring businesses that you discuss, Kyle, what brought you here in our region, and which is your background?
So I came here 15 years ago to 2010, and I was deciding whether to get a PhD in biofuel or to come to Africa and start a biofuel company here. I'd met some guy online and he had a bunch of waste and he could turn that into biofuel. And so it was either I get a PhD in biofuel where I know what I'll be doing for the next 5 years of my life, getting a PhD, or I go to Africa and I have no idea what I'll be doing in a week. And then when I phrased it that way, it became very easy to decide what to do. And so I traveled around. I went to Ghana, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and then I came to Kenya. And in the supermarket, I found something very interesting. And that is that Kenya passes the blue cheese test. I'm not a fan of blue cheese, but I saw blue cheese in the supermarket for the very first time in Africa, in Kenya in 2010. And I realized that if they have blue cheese, which was locally made, they must have entrepreneurship. They must have a middle class that can enjoy blue cheese. They must have a cold chain. They probably have great accountants. There's probably stainless steel pipes if I need that. And so, Kenya passes the blue cheese test. So thanks to Brown's Cheese that they make their blue cheese here. And then that's how got me started here.
That's a wonderful way to phrase it, the blue cheese way. And thank you to our friends in Limuro. That they are. But it's an interesting part because, of course, the pipes, the things, so the value chain is there, the milk and the work is there, and that's why how you came here to Kenya, and now you have also seen that there was a fertile area to create entrepreneurship and support entrepreneurs. So, and then Kuzana came on board. So, can you give us a brief of the story? What is Kuzana? What do you do? And how it works, which is the mission and vision for your company?
Yeah, sure. So our company is, we like to say we invest in boring and profitable businesses where so many investors are looking for the next sexy thing, drones or tech or whatever. We think that what drives the economy is SMEs doing things that are not particularly high risk. You're buying soybeans and you're selling soybeans. I cannot imagine a world where there is no longer a need for soybeans. In fact, it's going to keep on increasing as people need more and more meat, which basically all meat comes from soybeans, right? That part. But to go back even further, I started a biogas company in Kenya where we would sell to low income farmers. And there's a social impact angle to it and climate angle. So we were doing that and we made lots of revenue. We raised lots of money, but we never made a profit, ever, ever, ever. Never made a profit. Eventually I sold the company. And I know that you're just telling me now that the guy I sold the company to actually sold some biogas systems to some of your partners as well. So that's cool. But then after that, I started a Thai restaurant. And that Thai restaurant in Kenya, we were buying from poor farmers and we were selling to rich Nairobians. And that one made a profit from the very first month. And I was like, wow, I'm not a bad entrepreneur. I was pursuing a bad business opportunity. Right? So I was trying to sell to people with no money. And if you sell to people with no money, they cannot pay you. You can have them get loans and all these kind of things and ratchet up their debt, which has its own problems. But eventually they have to pay something. And if they don't have money, it's just like trying to squeeze water out of a rock. Meanwhile, if you buy from people with little money and you sell to rich people, there's lots of opportunity for business. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially impact entrepreneurs, get it backwards, and they try to push solutions rather than pull.
And it's a very interesting perspective, of course. No, I remember also using Takamoto, if you can mention that, and then it worked. And really, it's and what you said is a lot real because even though people maybe sometimes they see a problem, they approach it through the, let's say, grant or NGO approach rather than the profit angle. How do you see that? And how you're trying to, with your programs and work, to really change, this sometimes misconceptions that is with our entrepreneurs, especially in our areas.
Yeah. So the long and short of it, how we run this program is we have it's a 12-week acceleration workshop where we provide capital, but also we do the accounting for them. We connect them with mentors. They develop a board of directors. They do this together as a community to come to the workshops. And there's many different topics in there. And so how do we provide the skills and the capital that the companies need? We say there's three things actually more important than money. And those three things are one is focus. Most entrepreneurs, they're doing 27 different things before breakfast. And people who are the best in the world do one thing. So how do you find that one thing? One entrepreneur came, half of his headache was chickens, half of the headache was soybean, 99% of the revenue was soybean. It's like, why are you doing the chickens? Usually there's some emotional attachment. So you just remove that. The second thing is professionalization. So that is the accounting, it's the systems, so that you can go to Diani, you can go to the beach and enjoy your vacation without someone calling you with an emergency in 5 minutes. And the third thing is the community. So if I ask you which country has a stronger sense of community, the US or Kenya, I don't need to answer for you to know, right? And yet we invest in Kenya just like we do in the US, or at least Wazungu like me, when we come here, we invest one by one by one instead of taking advantage of the natural cultural systems that are in place here. So I think of Kuzana like a Chama. We look for the top 1%. A lot of NGOs are doing really important stuff. And as a business, we can leverage what they've done. But obviously, an NGO is not a business. And so they're not optimizing for money. But if you do optimize for money, then you have a different approach to this whole thing, right? And that's what we're doing.
And that is a very interesting perspective. I really agree with you. So, a lot of work with NGO world, I think we are discussing that can help, give the initial capex for others. But, the more and more important in the intervention, you optimize so that people like you or other or bank or financial institution can come in when they reach a certain stage. And in your investing practice, you have advocated a lot for boring businesses. You mentioned before. So why no, we live in the Silicon Savannah. Everybody is in artificial intelligence, tech, drones, as you mentioned, and others. So why agri-processing less glamorous SMEs than the new buzzwords? And does it make sense for returns for investors?
So as an investor, you look for two things. You look for companies and sectors that have huge growth potential, and you look for ones that are not overbought. So just because AI has huge potential, if there's too much money in it, then you can't get a good deal, right? So there might be some opportunities in tech, but they're mostly overbought. Everybody's trying to rush in. They saw what happened in Silicon Valley, and they think Silicon Savannah will be the same. But Silicon Savannah is very, very different. The market size of Kenya is half the size of San Antonio, Texas. And for anyone listening who's wondering what's San Antonio, Texas, exactly. It's like, a second a tier 2 city in the US, and the entire country of Kenya is half of San Antonio. So imagine going to a VC in Silicon Valley and saying, hey, I want to sell my app, but just to the south side of San Antonio, Texas. They will laugh you out of the room. The market is just not big enough. And yet we're, doing lots of tech companies here. And the thing about tech is that you pay the employees the same as you'd pay them anywhere else in the world because it's a very portable skill. They are being hired and poached all the time by Amazon and Facebook and Google. So you have to pay them the same. Meanwhile, the market is much smaller. If you compare that to, let's say, avocados, an avocado picker in the US is maybe paid $100 a day. In Kenya, maybe they're paid $5 a day. So there's a huge arbitrage opportunity there, right? Where those people can't easily just migrate to the US and pick avocados there. So It's so like I think tech is really overbought. I think the market size opportunity is not that big. And the huge opportunity is actually in what we call boring businesses. There's basically no market risk. You can't imagine a day where people don't want to buy avocados, right? Jeff Bezos has a line. He says, people always ask him, like, what's going to change in the future? He says, what's more interesting is what's not going to change because that's much more predictable. He can't imagine a world where people want slower shipments or more expensive products. He always knows he can make things faster, cheaper, and he'll always be in business, right? And so in boring business, there's even the most basic things like making toilet paper or just aggregating soybeans is a huge potential. And then on top of that, there's a financing potential because SMEs are the backbone of these economies. We know that. And yet they are not getting financing. What happens at the bank is they get deposits and then they buy government bonds because it's safe. And so if you can't, as an SME, you cannot get lending like you can in other parts of the world. One of our companies in avocado, it costs them 100% interest per year to finance their invoices for avocado in Kenya. They set up a company in Europe and it's 10% interest a year, which is high by European standards, right? But it's 1/10 the cost to finance the same exact thing in Europe. And there's just that huge gap of no one is coming in to finance these companies. Now, there's a good reason for that, and we'll get into that in some of my mistakes. Like capitalism is ruthlessly efficient, and there's a reason why these companies aren't being financed. But there is that opportunity too.
So if you argue that, of course, the traditional foods for an increasing population, agriculture, aggregation, it's a safer bet, if I understood correctly, and to summarize you, than the new buzzwords and others, which are highly, also there is more competition. And of course, the talent drain that, of course, a bigger company can play with the talent from here, which is true. I discussed with many startups and founders. Everybody's been poached by the big guys because, of course, they can pay more. And I want to ask, I mean, how do you choose? Because you say, okay, I focus on traditional areas that, they're there that will not change, of course, food, agribusiness and others. And I really like what you say, SMEs, because that is the funding gap. But how do you pick the founders? Because Kenya is, and all the region have a huge entrepreneurship. Everybody's doing an SMEs or others. So how do you pick the good one, the one they say they're focused, not to do the 27 things at the time? And which are the non-negotiables for you to invest and work with the company?
That's a really good question. How do you pick? Everyone wants to know the answer to that. The thing that I've realized is that what's most scarce is ambition. Being ambitious is the most important thing for an entrepreneur. And you think, well, everyone's ambitious, everyone wants to grow. Yes, mostly people are happy to get to, let's say, $100,000 a year, 1 million shillings a month in income, and then they're happy. And that doesn't work as an investor. We want someone who actually wants to solve big problems. And so it's a bit of a funny thing, right? Part of the challenge is, if you're in a village where the nicest thing in the village is a Toyota pickup truck, then as big as you can dream is a Toyota pickup truck. So one is just being able to dream big enough for whatever it is you're building. So that's one. The other thing is the market. Does the market make sense? We've seen, great entrepreneurs, like I was discussing before, a great entrepreneur pursuing biogas it's just, you're not going to win. It's just a very, very, very tough business to be in. And even if they do win to some extent, they could have won much more if they did a business or a sector that had more opportunity in it. So in summary, what we look for is we look for a CEO that we believe can bring the company to $10 million a year in revenue in the next 7 years profitably. So this rules out lots of companies that need lots of capital to grow, and they'll grow unprofitably. Lots of companies grow unprofitably. But we don't really want to be in that kind of thing. We don't want to be building tech for years and years and then hopefully monetize in 10 years and turn a profit. So that's just not what we do. We just grow, step by step, pole pole, and look for the CEOs that are really ambitious.
And a second question, we discussed with other people in the investing space. One of the things we discussed it is that sometimes there are some people, they say there's not enough exits in Kenya. That's why also there is a lot of funding gap. so there's not enough returns. And some other people said, we don't need to focus too much on exits. We need to find, to have the patient capital that allow companies to grow and have a slower return, but to have a more organic growth. How do you put yourself in this debate?
The hilarious thing is most people talking about patient capital, they think 10 years is patient. It's not patient. It took Elon, I think, 12 years just to get to the Model 3. It took Airbnb 12 years to exit. So 10 years is just not enough. And so anyone with a 10-year fund, it just doesn't make any sense in this market. Unless you're doing private equity, you can buy a supermarket and then flip the supermarket in 5 years. It, you need much more time than 10 years. Like if you need 12 years for Airbnb and Uber in a very developed market, you're going to need more time in a less developed market for sure. And so it's this mismatch where we're just copy pasting mimetically what Silicon Valley did in a very different market and a very different culture, right? And so instead, think from first principles about what makes sense. There's a company called Africa Eats. I highly recommend anyone check them out. They invested very early stage in companies, even when they were doing $25,000 a year in revenue. And those companies have grown. And now in aggregate, all the companies are worth about $100 million over the last 12 years or so. And they went public as a holding company, as an investor last year in Mauritius. And that seems to be working. And so they never have to sell the underlying companies. If investors want their exit, they just sell their shares in Africa Eats. So definitely check that one out. Yeah, that's where I think about this debate. So otherwise, either you do debt, which is short term, or you have a very, very long, deep relationship with your entrepreneurs.
So that's of course more risk, but of course that is also help the things. And you cannot have an exit in 1 year or two. And a subsequent question, I mean, which is the ticket size that's you with Kuzana and as an investor, you look in startups and SMEs here?
We invest, we provide, so we do fast and small. I see a lot of investors, they take sometimes 2 years or more to make a investment decision. And by then, the company is moved on. I was at a conference one time and I gave a talk and I asked the room, would they rather have $100,000 today or $200,000 a year from now? And virtually everyone said they want $100,000 today. They have incredibly high discount rate, right? And high time preference, meaning that they'd much rather, half as much money today as a year from now. That's a 100% interest rate, right? So how do we get money to companies fast? And the thing is, instead of doing all this due diligence, look at a company that's already doing well. They're already profitable. Like I call them Ugali profitable. You can survive on Ugali, at least for these founders. They haven't received any extra capital, so they must be surviving somehow. And then you get them, in shape and you see what happens with $20,000. You provide $20,000 of capital and see what happens. It's a relatively low risk, and we can do that. The first batch, it took us 109 days to make an investment. The second one took 89 days on average. The third one, we're targeting 45 days to make a decision. So we want to be faster than a bank. And then if that works well, we keep on investing in that company, right? Instead of doing it the Silicon Valley way. And the reason why people have to do it that way is if you have the structure of the fund is they only get a small fee. They do a fee-based kind of thing. And so you need to have a very big fund and make very big investments to justify and get enough of a fee. We have took a completely different approach like Africa Eats did in terms of how we are able to monetize and stay in business, which you just have to rethink things from the ground zero instead of just copying.
And a subsequent question on that, also on that, the debate is that Africa, it is not for the, let's say, small investors, people and other, but is for more experienced. So, and it is not a market for people that they don't have bigger tickets and others. Some other people say, okay, let's democratize investing in Africa. So pulling together maybe small capital from even, not, I will use retail in a way or smaller tickets, and then investing, as you say, the smaller ticket in companies. So how do you approach in Kuzana? Who are your backers? And in a way, how do you also include? Are you just, collecting from bigger companies, or even you're trying to democratize this space for even, let's say, retail investing or a small scale investor or even local investors that they want to support the growth of SMEs.
Yeah. So how do we find investors? So for me, I don't think Africa has to, you have to be big investors. I invested less than $10,000 in Africa Eats and got a great return there. Less than $10,000 in the Kenyan stock market, got a great return there as well. So there's lots of opportunities for smaller investors in very liquid ways to invest. How we raised money, it's my family and friends that came together to put the capital together. It's a bit of a longer story, but it's kind of a good one. So I have another business where we connect entrepreneurs and investors. And we had $10 million of contracts as of last year, this time, of which we would get $1 million commission. So I was going to use that to start Kuzana. That was very exciting. And so we had a bunch of entrepreneurs lined up and were ready to invest. And most of those contracts were with USAID. And so USAID obviously collapses in January, or it's canceled by our dear brother Trump in the US. And so we lost all that money that we were planning on investing in companies here. We didn't have it anymore. So I went around to my friends and said, hey, that is a good idea. I'm putting some money in. Let's all put some money in for this. And so that's how it started. And so I think one thing to think about for businesses is Kuzana is not a first time entrepreneur business. It's a second time entrepreneur business, right? You could think of this like Elon. His first business was a Yellow Pages directory. His second business was a payments company, which is more complex. And his third business was SpaceX. You don't want to go into like a SpaceX sexy kind of business like that your first time, no, or some drone business or whatever, right? And so this is like, I think Kuzana is a good second time business. I'd already made money, and then I had contacts and connections that could work. But we made that mistake of relying on a grants at the end of the day that we're going to then get commissions from and then funnel that into Kuzana. And so that was how we got our first money. The second batch was very interesting. I think people who are listening will find this interesting. Where I cold reached out to tons of people on LinkedIn. And the way I did this was I wrote an article which went viral, right? And the way I got it to go viral is I messaged lots of people and said, hey, can you comment, like, and I put the viral mechanics into that on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like blowing up. Everyone needs to be on LinkedIn, writing things there, just developing your voice. It is a really powerful tool right now, where it wasn't 2, 3 years ago, even in Kenya. Very powerful. I wrote that article, and then I searched for angel investors who are based in Africa. It says angel investor in their title, based in Africa on LinkedIn. And every day I would send 10 to 20 messages to people saying, hey, I see you're angel investing. We're both interested in Africa. Here's an article I wrote. Would love your feedback. And they're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Maybe 1%, 2% of people write back. And out of that, I got 3 investors, and they made decisions really fast. One of them decided in 3 days to invest in Kuzana. And so it was a combination of, having a good story that I told, reaching out. I met this woman at a conference, and she said it's called lukewarm outreach, not cold outreach, lukewarm, because they've already seen you on LinkedIn. I'd already reached, I think, about 1 million people this year from my LinkedIn post. Then I post this other one that goes viral. Then I share that with people, and they're like, oh, wow, this gets lots of interest. There's social proof here. I can see what you're doing. Anyone could go to my LinkedIn and see it. It's an article about Africa Eats. So I could write about myself without bragging, right, about what we were doing, but to brag about this other company that we're copying, I'd say, and trying to improve on their success. And yeah, and so we raised, 100K that way for the next batch. So that's just getting started, right? But there's tons of people who are interested in investing in Africa, and you just have to make people feel comfortable and give them a good investing experience. My goal is to make the best possible investing experience. Do you remember the first time you got out of an Uber and you had this magical moment where you were like, wow, I didn't tell him where to go. I haven't even paid him or given a credit card, didn't need to negotiate a fare. This was so magical. Why can't it be like that for investing? It is such a slog. It's very annoying. I asked some of our investors, how can we make this magical? And they're like, Kyle, you can't. Investing is boring. It's slow. And we want to change that. We have great events, and we incorporate investors into what we do. They mentor the entrepreneurs if they want to. And so they have a very hands-on, very exciting experience investing that's as good as the first time you took an Uber.
Fantastic. And I really like the work because that is also a huge opportunity, for people that believe in that in this area. And I really like also the power of social media. I could not. So it took a long, it's a, maybe it was a long journey, but it paid off. So it's a quite important one. And the third lesson, don't rely on grants because they come and they go on the strike of a pen. And on that, if you have now you have done, I mean, a series of round of investments and work, the first one may be a bit more than 3 months or 4 months, the other 89 days, then the other 45 days, that is months and a half to decide. So from all these rounds and from your work with the businesses, discussing with entrepreneur, yeah. So can you tell us some concrete cases, and maybe the names if you can, that you are really proud of, that they say those investments are the one like I like as Sky.
Yeah, I'm proud of all of them, to be honest. I don't know how we got so lucky, and I'm sure not all of them will work long term. I'll mention one, which is a company called Greenwells. They do soybean aggregation. And so it's the most quote unquote boring business you can imagine. They buy soybeans and then they sell soybeans. There's no value addition. They just truck them from A to B. And the margins aren't necessarily very big for it. And this is from an entrepreneur in Western Kenya who named Bernard Juma. And he saw that his neighbors and his friends, they were giving their soybeans to middlemen and often not being paid. And being a top graduate in his area, he looked in the mirror and said, I don't want to stand by this. I need to do something about this. He became a soybean aggregator, worked with his neighbors, bought the soybean, paid it at a fair price, and then sold them. And so he built the business to about 5 million shillings a month in revenue in December, which is about $40,000 a month. And yeah, so someone referred him to us. We gave that person a commission for the referral. So we're happy to pay referrals. So if anyone's listening and has someone in mind, please refer them to us and we'll give you a referral bonus. Then he joined the program, which was 12 weeks. And we helped him with accounting, helped him focus, doing the soybeans, not the chickens, because that's where all the revenue was. That's where the opportunity was for him and what he was very good at. Helped him find lenders. We helped find 200K of follow-on capital that he actually received and another $250,000 of term sheets, which he's had to draw down on. And his company grew more than 4x in just 7 months from December to July. And so is that a boring business, right? Or is that like the most exciting business? And our goal is to mint 1,000 more millionaires. That's our goal. We want our entrepreneurs to become millionaires. We want to make sure that creating wealth is destigmatized. It's actually a good thing if people look forward to becoming wealthy because there's so much good that can come of that, actually. And he is the first millionaire on paper to go through the Kuzana program. And it just happened in 7 months. So we just got to do that 1,000 more times.
And this is really transformational because also it helps also, cutting the middlemen, the commissions and others. So having aggregator is close to you and supporting farmer also give also returns, not only for the entrepreneur, of course, that is important, and the investor, but also all along the chain. So if done, so it's a quite an interesting perspective. And well, in 7 months, 4x, that's a huge impact. So it's really a very interesting case. I never thought that soybean could be so profitable, and that's I can agree with you. Very very boring business, but really really important, especially for a country that is growing and where demands for agriculture inputs is so high. And on that, because now this is a wonderful case, and but of course, I'm sure you have seen also the downsides and the challenges. So, can you give us, especially for the people that maybe they have been attracted from the episode and say, I have some businesses, maybe the listeners in the area. So, the three common mistakes that you have seen, and that's really, guys, don't do that. That the founders maybe sometimes do, and they really put you to failure, and some three advices and some three tips that you can give them on how really to make their SME successful.
Yeah, good question. So I'll go back to those three things that I mentioned: focus, professionalization, and community. To professionalize, and we've synthesized this down after doing this for months, weeks. The professionalizing, this is if someone wants to go big. If you're happy to have a small business, like have a small business. The best people if you listen and read podcasts or read books of the best entrepreneurs in history, they're extremely focused and hardworking. Like there's not a way out of that. If you want like quick money, this isn't it, right? But for people who do want that, the first thing is just to focus, which is to cut away all the things that you like and the pet projects for the one thing that's actually working. And once you have one thing, then you can consider doing something else. The general rule of thumb is if you're doing less than $10 million a year in revenue, only do one thing. Once you're doing more than 10 million, you can consider a second product or a second kind of customer. And so we see this all the time. There was one entrepreneur, they were selling through Facebook and they're also selling through Carrefour. Facebook was selling much higher margins, much more volume, but there's a prestige of being in Carrefour, right? And so you're tempted to start keep pushing Carrefour, but it's not making money. It's lower margins. They're going to pay you in 90 days versus cash sales on Facebook. Like, don't if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The second thing is professionalize, and that is to get all the systems in place. And I've actually been surprised with how much the challenge entrepreneurs have, anyone has, is you don't know what you don't know. So, for example, you think a lot of entrepreneurs thought their accounting was in order and they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get bank loans until they came to Kuzana and were like, oh, wow, this is a bit of a mess. Let's help you clean this up. And so you don't know that your accounting is a mess if you're paying your accountant, they do, a mediocre job, they, get things done at the end of the month, it's done, right? If they don't know what a good, typing speed is, we find a lot of people who are typing at like 20 words a minute. It's just very hard to run a business and communicate effectively if you're not typing at 50 words a minute, or don't know how to set up Google Drive. So you've got your files all over the place. If they're in a normal folder structure, then you can access them very easily. We had this problem before where we try to help companies raise capital, and then it would take months and months to get all the documents they needed. So that professionalization is something where you just don't know what you don't know. And so you want to be around other people, which brings us to community. I am shocked about how lonely entrepreneurs are. The most successful entrepreneurs have their head down and they're working hard and they're desperate for a good community. And that's why they choose Kuzana at the end of the day, because they're going to be around many more successful entrepreneurs and mentors and guest speakers at Kuzana, right? You know, Chris and Anu and Flora Mutahi and Peter and Duwati have been guest speakers, to name a few of the people they can interact with and be like, wow, okay, this person started at zero like me and they grew. So you're the average of your five closest friends. If your friends are still the ones from high school who are smoking weed 3 times a week, God bless them, they are not the ones that are going to propel you to be a millionaire or a decamillionaire. And that community is something that I'm just so surprised. I was just talking to our entrepreneurs and they're like, yeah, before Kuzana, I did not have anyone who was at my skill level running a business who had the ambition that I did. Right. And so being around those people, they're like, oh, I can do this, or I'm learning this, or, oh, this is how you can use Facebook to, generate ads and get like 10x, 20x ROI on your investment. Oh, I should be doing that. Right. And then you're like, ooh, I'm leveling up, leveling up. And that's how companies on average in Kuzana, they 2x their gross profit and 2x their revenue in, double their revenue in just 12 weeks. I think the last batch, everyone doubled in 12 weeks. It's like, wow. Right. And so it's really an amazing thing to see when you've got great people together.
That's really valuable and such a huge impact. And the mistake that you never have to do, something that if you want to start a business, don't do it. What would be?
Don't say tomorrow. Do it today. And that's something I always run into. I'm like, I could listen to this podcast. I could read this book, but you know, just get the thing done. And then there's so much compounding that happens. The only advantage you have at a startup or an early stage company is you can move fast. The big guys, Safaricom or Unga or whoever, they have the brand, they have the capital, they have the people, they can attract more people. You might be smarter than any single person there, maybe. But as a collective, they are smarter than you. They have more brain processing power than you. The only advantage you have at an early stage company is you can move fast. And if you're not moving things on a Saturday, if you're going home at 5 p.m., it's unlikely. And in, home, you might be able to get work done at home. You might be able to go to the bar, and that's actually where you make your sales. So that might be work. But if you're not thinking about work all the time and building this, then, and you're waiting for tomorrow to happen and you're making a decision tomorrow, I think that's the biggest mistake, is not moving fast. Because that's the only advantage you have. I mean, you could be a mom and pop business, happy, just churn out a little bit of profit every month and eventually be cannibalized by whatever big company is going to come around in 5 years and squash you. But if you want to build something big, you just have to move fast.
Fantastic, Kyle. Thank you for this wonderful episode and such a lot of food for thoughts for people, for entrepreneurs. And I really would like then maybe to book you in 1 year or something to see where you have taken Kuzana and see, your progress. So it's been an honor and pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Samuele, thank you for the work you're doing. This is really important that you're collecting all these stories from entrepreneurs and sharing them.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.